It comes as President Trump had announced the deal was mediated by the United States just this morning. World leaders were calling for this immediate de-escalation in the area after each side had exchanged missile attacks. Here with us now to break this down is the Vice President for Policy at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, Blaise Misztal. Blaise, thank you so much for being here. Just want to get your immediate thoughts and concerns possibly about this sudden turn of events.
Well, good afternoon, Alicia. It is certainly concerning. I think we've all been watching India and Pakistan very closely for the last 2 weeks since that terror attack in Indian-controlled Kashmir for two reasons. One, these are two countries that have a history of conflict and war. And secondly, they're nuclear-armed countries. And so there's great concern that any exchange of fire, any friction, any escalation could lead to a nuclear conflict here. I think that's why the world likely sighed a sigh of relief when President Trump announced a ceasefire. And that's why the ceasefire seemingly not holding is so troubling, because it suggests that there could be further escalation here and a broader conflict. We don't yet know what happened, why the ceasefire hasn't held. Perhaps it was just one country trying to get off sort of a last series of attacks. Perhaps it was some sort of miscommunication. Hopefully it's the latter, but this is going to require more U.S., I think, intervention and pressure and leverage on both sides to try to quiet this down before it gets worse.
Yeah, given that the story is developing literally now by the hour, what is your level of a concern? Again, as you point out, that both of these countries are nuclear armed. What is your level of concern, and what is your level of hope in terms of another ceasefire agreement being reached?
Yeah, I think it's too early to know how this will play out. I'd want to at least wait until we hear statements from both sides, suggesting both what they think happened and what their attitude towards it is. If they see this as some sort of a misfire, if they think that this was some sort of a mistake, or if they see that each side thinks it was a willful violation, that it was bad faith on the part of the other side, and that they're going to push further. It does require, I think, U.S. heavy-handed intervention here to try to force both sides back into their corners. Unfortunately, this is happening while President Trump and his administration are busy with all sorts of other negotiations. He's headed to the Middle East. Russia-Ukraine talks are going on. Trade negotiations with China and other countries are going on. So this is a busy time, and it's yet another demand on the president's attention. And having his full attention, I think, is the thing that's going to convince both sides they need to cut this out.
And to your point a moment ago, we have not heard from Pakistan on their end, any officials there, on what happened here, if this is a misfire or, as you pointed out, potentially intentional. Let me go to this. Earlier, NewsNation actually spoke with State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce on the role the United States played in this mediation. Take a listen really quickly.
President Trump has made it clearly at the very beginning of his administration the North Star of what matters to him, which is to be a peacemaker. And that's something that can only happen when the world takes you seriously, understands your power, your influence, and the strength of the United States itself matters.
Now, I'll point out really quickly that we're just getting information that the Pakistan Prime Minister is speaking. We're working on translating information from that. But to what Tammy Bruce said there a moment ago, how important is it that the United States play a role in this conversation, especially right now?
I think it's incredibly important for two reasons. First of all, as an intermediary between the two sides, we know the Indians and the Pakistanis do not trust each other. There needs to be someone who can go back and forth between them, who is trusted by both sides. The U.S. has a history of working with both countries. Very importantly, can be a player. But they also need some pressure to be told to back down when they might not want to. And again, it's important for the United States as one of the sole countries in the world who can bring that sort of pressure. It's actually unfortunate that in the last couple of years, Pakistan has fallen more into the Chinese camp. The United States has lost some of the pressure, leverage it has had. That might be a factor here, not able to exert quite as much pressure on the Pakistanis as we might have been a couple of years ago. But it's still only the United States that can and does play this role globally.
I don't want to be an alarmist, but I do want to understand what are the possible global impacts if this ceasefire does not hold?
Yeah, well, the worst case scenario that everyone is concerned of is a nuclear exchange with two of the world's most highly populated countries, India with over a billion people. The potential for civilian death could be high. The potential for disruption of trade could be high. India is increasingly a manufacturer and of high-tech goods and other services and goods that we rely on globally. So huge disruption, huge loss of life, and a protracted war. Even if it doesn't go nuclear, if this spirals out of control, we could see conflict going on for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point there, even if, for a trade perspective, while the U.S. is in this trade war with China, India is an outlet for us potentially on the manufacturing and trade concerns there. Let me pivot to this because this is an unfortunate theme we're seeing with ceasefires not holding up. Let's talk about Ukraine. Today marks the end of a 3-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Now, both sides also have accused each other of violating this agreement. And this comes at a time as the European Union and the U.S. have been efforting this longer 30-day halt to the war. What do you think about that in terms of whether we see that soon and whether Russia accepts some sort of concession to do a 30-day ceasefire?
Look, we've seen various proposals for 1-day, 2-day, 3-day ceasefires over the last month. Some of them put forward by Russia, some of them put forward by Ukraine. None of them seems to have held. It seems to me that particularly on the Russian side, these ceasefire deals or ceasefire proposals are really an attempt to appear to be interested in peace, to appear to be interested in diplomacy, without actually having to make any of the hard decisions and actions that come with actually engaging in negotiations. So it seems to me that the Russians have demonstrated time and time again that they're not interested in negotiations. When they do sit down at the table, it is not in good faith, and that they have every intention and interest of continuing this war until something or someone forces their hand otherwise. And so far, neither Ukraine nor President Trump, unfortunately, has been able to accomplish that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are waiting to see if sanctions become the end, result to getting towards that. Let me pivot one more time here. As you said, there's so much going on. I want to talk about this. Iran's foreign minister just saying today that they will not back down from nuclear rights. It comes as President Trump is heading to the Middle East next week, and his U.S. special envoy is set to have these talks with Iran tomorrow. What should we expect from these talks and this trip?
Yeah, so two different things, but they're related. President Trump is heading to Saudi Arabia. He'll be meeting with the leaders of that country, as well as the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, looking at a number of issues, including business deals, trying to get investment into the United States, security arrangements with those countries, also potentially hoping to reach some sort of peace deal between Israel and Hamas and Gaza, but also trying to broker an expansion of the Abraham Accords potentially between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That might not seem like it's connected to the Iran talks that are happening, but it is, because it is the joint threat of Iran equally to Israel and the Persian Gulf countries that has brought them closer together, and a strong U.S. stance demanding that Iran give up its nuclear program, dismantle it, as President Trump has said multiple times, shows that sort of U.S. leadership, which is going to affirm to both Israeli and Arab partners that the U.S. remains a good partner, that it is the right country to hitch their wagon to, and is going to make the sort of deals that President Trump wants to get done doable.
Yeah, this administration seemingly stretched on making peace deals around the world. Blaise Misztal, thank you so much for your